Hello, everyone. You're tuned into the Path Radio Spotlight, courtesy of thepathradio.com. I'm your host, Guido Prino. Now, they say every great band has a story, but some stories are too good to keep quiet. And the fifth story is one that's long overdue for the spotlight. Fronted by Roy Cathey, called by some the most underrated rock vocalist on the planet, the fifth has been steadily building a loyal following, not by chasing trends, but by doing what they do best: writing songs that stick, melodies that move, and lyrics that actually mean something. From their powerful new single, Haunted Heart, already hailed as a future classic by none other than Ron Keel, to their breakout album, We Are One, the fifth is carving out a space in the hard rock world that's entirely their own. And they're just getting started. So let's dive into the music, the journey, and the voices behind the band. The fifth is on a mission to make you feel every note. They are Justin Womble on guitars, Jake Tripp on bass, Gary Zeus Smith on drums, and our guest tonight on lead vocals, Roy Cathey. Roy, welcome. How are you doing?
Good evening, sir. How are you, Guido? It's great to be here, my friend.
It's good to have you. We're dealing with storms, and you're dealing with heat or humidity.
Yeah,
Which is it?
yes, it's so many different you can have every season possible here in North Carolina within a 2, 3 day period. So there's no telling. Today it's very humid and there's some storms coming in tonight as well. So I'm right there with you. Probably not as bad as what you're experiencing
It,
though.
it almost sounds Canadian. Just wait 15 minutes and the weather changes.
Yes, there's a saying around here, if you don't like the weather in North Carolina, wait 5 minutes.
So look, man, you're the second consecutive interview with a link to North Carolina, and I understand that you're originally from there. And as we know, you were out in Los Angeles. You did some work with Cold Sweat, of course, but you made your
Yes.
way back to the North Carolina rock scene. What's one of the biggest differences that you can share with us when it comes to the two different places, and
Mhm.
with respect to the rock scenes?
Well, I mean, Los Angeles is Los Angeles. It's an entertainment mecca. It's the lifeblood of a lot of rock and roll and stuff like that, the Sunset Strip and so on and so forth. So very cutthroat, very competitive, and it's one of those things where you got to think fast and you got to be on your feet all the time. North Carolina has a much more laid back kind of vibe. It's much more of a homegrown, hometown kind of feeling. But still, all musicians and all bands, it's a competitive industry, and that just goes with the territory. But things are a little bit slower here in North Carolina. We might get the trends, maybe 3, 4 months behind whatever's happening in Los Angeles or in New York. But most of all, there is some really good, organic, real music that has always come out of North Carolina, and I'm proud to be from the state, even though a lot of times Southerners get a bad rap, but as we spoke a little bit briefly earlier, I've had the fortunate ability to travel through rock and roll, and I've got to experience a lot of countries and cultures and stuff like that. So some people pick up my accent, other people don't, and they're surprised that I'm from North Carolina. But at any rate, not all of us talk like this.
You know what? I try. I do these different impersonations, and the kids get upset with me because they say I'm not being appropriate when I do accents or whatever. So I keep it to the confines, I don't go too far with it,
Yes.
right? But
Yeah.
there's something interesting though. Like I'm noticing, and when you talked about, LA, it's kind of like the mecca of rock and sort of thing. But I've been noticing a trend the last little while that you've got your LA pocket, you've got this Las Vegas pocket, and there's definitely this Carolina pocket as well.
Hmm.
And
Yes.
it just seems like I don't know, before I didn't hear as much about the Carolina pocket. I mean, like there's some obvious famous things that have come out of Carolina in respect to
Right.
music,
Right.
but it just seems like it's something's attracting musicians back to Carolina, or there's a lot of good music noise coming out of Carolina now.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of people might not realize, Shinedown is a Southern band. There you can't get a more huge modern rock band than Shinedown. You've got bands like Sevendust. They're from some of the guys in Sevendust are right down the road here from me, Lumberton, North Carolina, but they're based out of Atlanta, Georgia. So, there is always been the pulse and the heartbeat of some great rock and roll here in this state. It's just because we're not in like one of the glamorous music cities. Sometimes we kind of fly under the radar, and sometimes that makes people go, "Whoa, where did this come from?" They look at you like you're from Mars, but no, you've just been doing your thing in a different region of the country.
Called Carolina. Now look, you've got some obvious roots here. And you've been called North Carolina's best kept secret. Do you feel that there's something about your sound or your story that's tied to where you're from in Carolina?
Well, I think a lot of it just, I think my North Carolina roots kind of makes people scratch their head in a lot of ways. In a lot of ways, like I said previously, it's made me kind of fly under the radar for many, many years, because when I got the Cold Sweat gig, I mean, they audition guys from all over the country, and every singer in Los Angeles auditioned for that gig. And here a kid from North Carolina ends up getting it. You know what I mean? So, I think the main thing about me is it's my tenacity and it's my stick to itiveness that I have through the years, because it's a southern trait of just not laying down. You're just not going to stop the fight. You're going to keep doing what you're doing, and that's also how I was raised by my father. So I think a lot of my southern roots, and people kind of look at me as like the wild-eyed southern boy and everything. It's just because I'm just too stubborn to stop. So,
And maybe that bleeds into you also being described apparently as the mouth of the South. And look at I know we're talking music, but I'm a big wrestling guy, right? Growing up,
me as
Jimmy
well.
Mouth of
Don't
the
get me
South.
started, Guido.
Are you
Oh my
really?
God.
Are you wrestling?
Let me tell you something, brother. I grew up ringside watching the Four Horsemen, and I've seen it all. Dusty Rhodes, Ricky Steamboat, Ric Flair. I mean, I grew up I'm an NWA guy.
Yeah.
And yeah, I am a huge mark. My girlfriend, she hates life because I'm like, well, I'm that guy that's like, I watch it like 4 nights a week. Anytime it's on TV, I'm watching it. But me and you could do a podcast just on wrestling. But the whole mouth of the South thing, it came, predominantly from my projection. I've got a very loud voice, and also it comes from the fact that I have always been that guy that has not been afraid to speak out. I've never been afraid to voice my opinion. It has gotten me in trouble. It has probably cost me some fans. But I come from a very solid background, and my father taught me there's right and there's wrong, and there's no gray area in there. And I've just always been the one that's fought for the little guy, and I've always been the one that's not been afraid to call people out when I see bigotry, racism, just all of it. I've always been that guy. And being from the South, I have rubbed some people wrong, because I will call people out. And the mouth of the South kind of started catching on, and it was the whole time I'm thinking, you guys know that's Jimmy Hart's thing, right? But they didn't know, and I just kind of rolled with it, and it's stuck through the years. So I'm gonna see if that thing is trademarked. I'm pretty sure that he's got that
Do,
trademarked in some
do you
way.
do you have a jacket with like hearts on it or anything?
No, no, but I do have a bullhorn over here. Sorry,
I was gonna like say, do you walk around with a megaphone at all, or
we rock around with the megaphone.
yeah?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, you know
No,
what? What was it? Stone Temple Pilots. Scott Weiland did it for a
yep,
while, I think, right? Did the whole megaphone thing
absolutely.
for a while. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yes.
No, that would be
Yeah,
kind of cool.
we can go down the rabbit hole of wrestling anytime you want, Guido. Anytime you want.
Oh, oh, it's an illness for me.
Well, I
Roy,
mean,
I've got action figures still, Roy. Like,
I've got some stuff in here somewhere. Oh, wait a minute. Hold on. Stay here with me. Hold on.
no.
Here we go. Ah.
I made him go into the wrestling gear. No. Ray Ray. Wow. Very sweet.
So, we played the Kiss Cruise in 2022, and we stopped over in where was it? Cabo San Lucas. And what does Roy do? I end up getting a wrestling mask. I'm like going around getting wrestling. I don't know whose this was, but I like the black and the silver. So
Yeah, that looks pretty cool. Well, anytime you see one of those, the first thing that comes to mind, of course, is Rey Mysterio. But
right, right,
there's so
absolutely.
many other lucha wrestlers that I'm sure if anybody who is really hardcore lucha would say, "Come on, that's who you think of, Rey Mysterio." But sorry, guys.
Yeah. Hey, that's
Yeah.
just the way it is. He's one of the most famous,
Yeah.
But
And music bleeds wrestling and wrestling bleeds music.
yes.
So that's cool. That's cool. You know what? I'm just thinking to myself, it'd be cool, like, you're doing the live show and just the intro alone. And now the mouth of the South, and
Yeah.
come out. Anyways, I digress.
Absolutely.
I
Yes,
digress.
yes.
So look, you talked about Cold Sweat, and now your career spans. You've been with Gibraltar, you've been with Cold Sweat, now you've got the fifth.
Yes.
As you're moving between the bands and the experiences, what happens to you in terms of your identity as an artist as you go through these bands?
Well, Gibraltar was my high school band. It was managed by my father. We toured up and down the East Coast for many many years. When I was like a senior in high school, my band we had the number one song on the local radio station. So you couldn't tell me nothing my senior year of high school. You know what I mean? The school guidance counselor calls me and goes, "Okay, Roy, getting ready to graduate. What are your plans after school?" And I'm like, "I'm going to be the next Bon Jovi. Can I get out of here, please?" So I mean, it's like Gibraltar is really where I cut my teeth. We were primarily a cover band, but we did like Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, Black Sabbath, AC/DC. We did the bubblegum stuff like Bon Jovi and Europe and all that stuff. So I basically cut my teeth singing 3 to 4 hours a night, doing this really hard, heavy metal, high energy music. So whenever I went out to Los Angeles to audition for Cold Sweat, I'll never forget when I went to do the audition. They couldn't believe that I kept getting better. Every time that I would go through the song, they were waiting for my voice to go out because a lot of those LA guys, they're a cloud of smoke and they're done. They'll give you 30 minutes, 45 minutes tops, and then their voice is gone. With me, I was a machine. I was just like, and every time, and we went through the songs like 6 times, like 5 songs 6 times, and they had been auditioning guys at the same. We were auditioning at Sound City, where we recorded the record, and not the most glamorous of rehearsal studios. I mean, a real piece of shit PA. Nothing really glamorous at all. And after I went through the songs a couple of times, Eric Gammons told me that he leaned over to Chris McClernand and he goes, "How come this guy sounds so good on this crappy PA on this?" And it was just the fact that I had cut my teeth on that kind of music and endurance. So each band is like a chapter of my life. Gibraltar is kind of when I started as a kid. I started out with the stuff like the Van Halens and the AC/DCs, and then I heard Judas Priest Unleashed in the East, and I'm like, oh my God, I got to learn how to hit those high notes. And I just tried to progress as a vocalist as I went along, and Cold Sweat was an amazing experience because I'm working with people like Mark Ferrari, and there was some great material, and it really gave me a chance to stretch myself as a vocalist, and working with a producer like Kevin Beamish. He brought out a lot of great things out of me. And moving on to the fifth, everything is just like a different chapter of my life. The earlier fifth catalog was much more early 2000 modern rock kind of stuff. It was a lot in the lower register. I was doing a little bit more screaming and stuff like that. And people were like, "Why aren't you doing the high notes like you did in Cold Sweat?" And I was like, "Well, I don't really want to do it." But then later on, I started to re-embrace that part of my career and everything. And luckily, I still have the high note, and I could still hit those notes and stuff like that. And here I am doing a podcast with the Guido. So
With the
it
Guido. It's a, you know what? It's cool. It's a really great story about progression. You haven't compartmentalized each of those experiences and left them unto themselves, but you've really just seems to have built on onto them, and you reach back when you need to reach back, sort of thing.
Right.
I'm just curious, right? Gibraltar, the name, like so many different things. There's the, of course, Mediterranean Sea, Gibraltar. There's
Right. Right.
Gibraltar, the flea market in Detroit that I used to frequent when I go to the Palace of Auburn Hills to go watch, Van Halen and Queensryche and all those other bands too. What was for you guys? Where did Gibraltar come from? Just out of curiosity. I know we're talking the fifth, but
Solid rock. I mean, we were teenagers, man. We were kids, So the guitar player just was like, "Man, we should name the band Gibraltar. It's a solid rock album, solid rock island, man. Gibraltar, solid rock, man. What do you
yeah,
think?" And
yeah.
you're smoking dope and drinking beers in the back of a pickup, and you're like, "Yeah, solid rock." So basically, that's where it came from. We just kind of thought it
That's
sounded
solid.
cool. Yeah,
Yeah, no, it's cool. It's funny. You made me think, back in the day, like in high school when I thought I could like be in a band and play, which we really couldn't. Our band name was Meridian, and it had
ah,
something to do with being the center of the spine, or I don't even remember. It made really good sense,
yeah.
like to 16-year-old me.
You're right
It's
there. That's a cool name. Let me write that down.
Meridian.
Meridian.
Never went anywhere. Never copyrighted it. And I actually remember where I got it from too. I was driving by a physiotherapy place, and it had
Mhm.
something to do with the spine, and it was Meridian. So anyways, um
That's cool. That's actually a
Gibraltar,
cool
solid
name.
rock. I like that way better. So, as we move on to your current band, right? We explore the band, the fifth new single, Haunted Heart. Look, this song, I've had it on repeat, and you've taken me back. It is hailed as an instant classic power ballad.
Mhm.
Walk us through, if you can, a little bit in terms of the inspiration, maybe the creative process behind the track, its birth.
Well, I always try and write lyrics that are different and mean something, And I knew that, okay, this is a slow song, this is a ballad, but I didn't want to write it the atypical ballad, baby, I love you and I miss you and you're my girl and all that stuff. Not that there's anything wrong with that. But this time around, I just kind of went, what if a man moved into a house that was haunted by a female ghost, and she falls in love with him and he ends up falling in love with her. So I kind of tried to take that angle with it. And Haunted Heart, it just kind of made it sound a little bit cooler. You know what I mean? It made it to where it wasn't the atypical ballad, and I could not be happier with the way that it turned out. It stretched me lyrically. A spectral touch. I've never used anything like that before in a lyric, and I just, as I've progressed as a singer songwriter and a lyricist, I just try and write stories. I try and write mini movies, and I try and make it to where the listener can kind of listen to it, absorb it, put themselves in that position, or be able to feel the emotions and the message that I'm trying to get out. And I think Haunted Heart just turned out fabulous. So,
Yeah, you know what? And that's part of the allure to it is the abstract part of it, as you
mhm,
say, the story behind it. It
right,
isn't as direct as like some of the early ballads back in the 80s, etc., the power ballads, rock ballads. There's an
right,
abstract element to it. You have that hook in the song that makes me want to hit repeat, but
yeah,
then there's also the story that you kind of want to hear over and over again.
right, right.
So now to go with that, you also have wonderful video, visually striking. What's the vision behind the video? And how do you complement the song's themes as we're navigating the candlelight and everything like that? So not to give too much away because I want people to watch it. So
Well, I mean, I will be completely transparent. I knew nothing about the video. I knew absolutely nothing about the video. I was contacted by label president Ron Keel, and he was like, "Hey, Haunted Heart's going to be the next single. We're working on a video, and you're going to love it." And I'm like, "Working on a video? What are you talking about? I don't have time to shoot a video." And he's like, "Don't worry about it. We have it all taken care of. You're going to love it." And it was literally shocking. And now I kind of understand why some people are kind of freaked out by AI, because what they basically did is they uploaded, photos of me from the last photo shoot that I did for the We Are One record. And they went to my girlfriend's Facebook page and uploaded photos of her. And they made that video. And I had no contact with the guy that did it. I had no contact with anybody, but the video turned out in, I mean, it's eerie how close to what I was actually kind of seeing and thinking about when I wrote it. And, it knocked it out of the park. And it's probably, even though I wasn't actually on set to have anything to do with it, it's probably the best video that I've ever been involved with. And it's just it's visually striking, it's very haunting. It goes with the music, it goes with the story that I'm telling with the lyrics, and it's a banger, man. I mean, it's one of those videos that, remember back in the day when MTV actually played music videos. This is one of those videos that would have catapulted a band to like mega stardom, because it is just that visually striking and stuff. So I'm super proud of Haunted Heart.
Roy, if I could have, before we started this conversation, if I could have sealed an envelope and inside the envelope, I would have put a piece of paper that said it reminded me of one of those MTV. That's exactly the feeling that I had. And if I could open the envelope right now, people are saying, "Oh, you're just saying that." But I'm telling you, I
Mhm.
was watching it. I was like, this is a video I would have recorded on my VCR, or
Yes.
Betamax, but whatever. Um,
You're dating yourself, Guido. Stop.
I would have recorded on my VCR and then after school, run home to do watch the videos. And it had that feeling. You said it's haunting and obviously, that's part of the song name, but you also get that, right? It
Mhm.
stirs you. There's some emotion that it stirs as well. It's doing really well, like in terms of views and stuff. So we're gonna encourage folks to check that video out. Listen, but here it's almost like, what, reading the book and then watching the movie. I would say to folks, listen to the song and then go watch
Mhm.
the video.
Right.
Because once you absorb the song and then you see, there's little parts of the video where I get little goosebumps because I'm like, oh, right there it is, right? Sort of thing. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Well, I mean, I'm super proud of it because, the song stands on its own. If you listen to it, the song stands on. It doesn't need the video
yeah,
to make the song better, and the video doesn't need the song doesn't need the video. But you put it together, and it's peanut butter and jelly. You know what I mean? It's
yeah,
just like it goes perfect together. So it's something that I'm super proud of, and I am kind of surprised with the views that it's already picked up in a short period of time. And we're not in the hundreds of thousands of views, but I mean, I'm proud of it, and it's
yeah.
it's organic, and people are seeing it and they're going, wow, this does remind me of the heyday of the music video. So
But
that's
and we're saying that, but there's a modernized element to it, and that's what I want folks to
yes.
tap into, right? So you could have lived through the era that we lived through and say, "Hey, cool, I connect." But even today, if I didn't, I would look at that and there's something modern about it that is relevant to today. Speaking of today, and I know you've referenced Mark Ferrari and Chris McLaren a couple of times. I've had both of them on the show, and I love both of them. They're great.
They're my
Um,
brothers.
they're amazing people. Not just the music, but amazing people.
Yes.
Recording "We Are One" at Shinedown's Big Animal Studio. That's got to be a cool experience. And McLernan, Chris McLernan, he's involved in that. So how did the studio's environment and Chris's production influence the sound?
Well, when we first started recording the record, the discussions came up, and management and Ron at the label was like, "Well, is there anybody that you would have in mind that you would want to produce this thing? And I immediately thought of Chris, because me and Chris are musical brothers. Our time in Cold Sweat together, we're bonded forever, through the experiences that we had in that band. And Chris was always just, even back then, he was just like the super musical guy. You know what I mean? He was the guy that could pick out the three-part harmonies and go, oh, you sing this part and you sing that part. I mean, he was like a musical idiot savant. You know what I mean? He's like musical Rain Man. Oh, that's a C sharp major. I mean, he's like, so, I knew that Chris was getting to a point to where he wanted to branch out and start spreading his wings and flexing his musical muscle a little bit. And working with Chris was just like coming home. I mean, there was no weirdness. He was able to pull a lot out of me. We recorded the vocals at our manager's house in Charleston, South Carolina. So everything was, I did my vocals there. We did the tracking at Shinedown's recording studio. And Chris has been living down in Charleston, South Carolina for several years, and he's gotten to be very close with Eric Bass, the bass player of Shinedown, and has gotten very close to the Shinedown fellas. And through that, he's basically been in that studio for the last 3 or 4 Shinedown records. I mean, he's been there while they were crafting the songs, recording the songs, mixing the songs. He was like there. And when we first started, talking about recording and where we were going to do it and what we were going to do, he just kind of mentioned to Eric. He was like, "Hey, I've got my first production gig. It's my singer friend Roy from Cold Sweat. We're about to start, recording." And he goes, "Well, why don't you record it here?" And Chris is like, "Okay." So when he told me that we had that opportunity, I mean, I was just absolutely floored that, because we're the only other band that has recorded at that studio, because it's at Eric Bass's house, the complex that he lives at. And
Awesome.
it was just, you walk in there and you get a sense of like, holy cow, the millions upon millions of records that have been sold from the songs that were written in this building,
Mm.
and no pressure. You got to go in there and have it together. And luckily, everybody was really, they stepped up and made it happen. So it turned out to be a great record, and a great producer can make a good song great. And Chris was able to, as I like to say, he put the sprinkles on the cupcake. I mean, he was that guy that he wasn't overly heavy-handed. He didn't overly produce it, but he was great at like, hey, add a harmony here. We're gonna add a little acoustic guitar there, and just the little production tricks that he did was just phenomenal. So I mean, if we didn't have Chris producing this record, I don't think that we would have gotten the results that we did.
Kudos to Chris. Great to hear that story about him too. This thing is really about relationships. So that's the other sense that I'm getting. It's
Yes.
about relationships, and with We Are One being your debut full-length album with RFK Media, you've mentioned Ron Keel a few times now.
Yes.
How does this collaboration come about, and what does this mean, working with Ron and the band's future?
Well, it's kind of fascinating, and life, life is a trip. I mean, it's just, I've had a incredible life and career. And one of the first big rock concerts I went to see was Keel, Crocus, Accept, and Helix at the local auditorium here, and it was like 1983, and I was like 15 years old. And if somebody would have come up to me and gone, "Hey, yeah, see that guy with the blonde streak in his hair? You're going to be in a band with him in a couple of years. And you see the guy, the lead singer there? He's going to be the president of your record label." And I would have been like, "Give me what you're smoking, because it's good." But basically, what happened is I met Ron, when I was out in Los Angeles through the whole Cold Sweat experience. Always incredibly gracious, always incredibly encouraging. There was just no ego, no attitude. He was just accepting and very welcoming. And back then, I was 23 years old, man. I was a kid from North Carolina that had been playing the bar circuit in the Southeast, and now here I am. I'm rolling with the big boys, and here's Ron Keel, just being the coolest guy ever. And we struck up, an acquaintanceship kind of thing. And fast forward to when Cold Sweat reunited in 2020 on the Monsters of Rock cruise. Ron was also on the cruise with Keel. So Mark was doing double duty, triple duty, because he was doing the Cold Gin thing with the boys, and he was also doing Cold Sweat reunion, and he was playing with Keel. And I reconnected with Ron, and he called me up on stage to sing, the Right to Rock, and I was still just blown away. Then I'm like going, holy cow, Ron remembers me, and he wants me to get up on stage and sing with him. And for me, I'm always going to be that kid from North Carolina. I'm always going to be the fan. I'm always going to be the kid that's pinching himself that I'm getting to do this stuff, And he calls me up on stage, and we do the song, reconnected, built on our friendship. And his partner in RFK Media, Aaron Fisher, who is like Ron's right hand man, and he acts as like the stage manager, tour manager for Keel and whatnot. Aaron had been kind of following me and my career and the Fifth's career. And when him and Ron decided to start RFK Media, it was Aaron that was like, "Hey, what about Roy Cathey's band, the Fifth?" He goes, "I've been keeping my eye on Roy. The guy just doesn't give up. He can take the lumps, he could take the punches and the hits and the headbutts, and he just keeps moving forward. He doesn't stop. He's got that grit." And Ron was like, "I'm sold on Roy Cathey." He goes, "I'm sold on Roy. Sell me on the Fifth." And Aaron, shared some of our past catalog with Ron, and he was like, "Okay, let's do it." And it was a it was a great moment when we were first approached. We were the first band signed to the label, and that really kind of made me feel almost like career vindication, because the Fifth has been my baby for many, many years, and as I've languished away here in the Southeast, playing every beer joint that would book us and stuff like that, to have Ron go, "Hey, I'm starting this new record label, and I'd really like to sign you in the Fifth." It was like just wow, So we've got a great label with a great team, and Ron's been an incredible mentor. It's like, and I've got Ron Keel in my cell phone, and if I want to call or text Ron, I could go Ron, and he's like, "Roy Cathey," he answers the phone. So the kid from North Carolina is always going to be kind of blown away with that. So our relationship with RFK and Ron is strong, and we plan on building on what we've started. So
Amazing story. I think that goes from surreal to maybe now you know, you're there with them. Like you're part of the cornerstone, right? Like you're part of the cornerstone of RFK Media. So,
right, right.
um, what an inspiring thing to have happened to you, and congratulations. It's
Thank you,
amazing.
Guido. I appreciate that. I appreciate it.
Um, you know, when we talk about mentors and relationships, um, I'll share with you, like earlier this year, I lost my father. He
Mm,
almost made it to 91 years old. He was only a few weeks away from that. And, not a day goes by. I miss him daily, miss him dearly. I'm sorry to
yes.
hear about your father's passing as well. Um, and when we were going to do this, I had this connection there because
Hmm.
you also said that the Fifth was formed as a form of musical therapy after your father's passing, and you talked
Hmm.
about him with Gibraltar, etc. Right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Tell us about that if you can, and how that has helped.
My dad was my hero. My dad was, I was heavily into sports going through junior high and high school, and I was a friend with everybody, the stoners, the preps, black, white, yellow, green. And I was playing football, and I was about to go to NC State football camp. I just came back from it. And I was about to move to varsity and all that stuff. And I had a friend that played in a rock band, and I went to go see him practice one day. And there's, it was they were doing, "You Really Got Me" by Van Halen, and the guy just didn't have the singer didn't have the cadence. Girl, you really got me now. Because for some reason that record made me want to be a rock star. I love that record. I was already very musical growing up. I loved Queen and all that kind of stuff. But I remember going, hey, I'm a cocky little, football player, and I'm like, hey, man, you're doing that wrong. It's wrong, man. And he's like, well, yeah, well, why don't you try it? And I'm like, okay, grab the mic, and I did it, and they fired him and hired me that day. So I remember going home, and my mom and dad, I'll never forget this. My dad was sitting at the kitchen table. My mom was at the sink getting ready to make dinner. And I come in and I'm like, Mom, Dad, I'm singing in a rock band. And my mom lost her shit. She's like, no, you're not. You're about to go to college, and you've got a future in football, and you're gonna play varsity next year. And she just starts going off, man. And my dad just quietly gets up from the kitchen table, and he walks down the hallway, and he opens up a closet in his bedroom, and I hear him rummage around, and he comes walking down the hallway, and he's got an album in his hand, and he puts it on the kitchen table. Boop. And it's the Cathey Trio. And it was his brother and his cousins. They had a gospel bluegrass band, and they had put out an album. And he goes, this is where you got it from. Judy, shut the hell up. If the boy wants to sing, we're going to let him sing. And, I was kind of given the chance and the opportunity. He was, hey, do after I kind of got into it, and I had a knack for it, you know, he goes, hey, do you want to do this rock and roll thing, or do you want to still play football? And of course, I'm like, I want to do the rock and roll thing. So the money they had saved for college, he spent it on a PA and lights, because back then, if you wanted to play the clubs, you had to have your own PA, you had to have your own lights, you had to have the truck, so I turned into the family business, and my father
Mhm.
supported me 100%. So I would not be where I'm at if it wasn't for my dad. And that is part of the reason that I will never stop doing what I do, because to me, it would be a dishonor to him if I stopped. So, yes, in a lot of ways, the fifth is and was a way for me to kind of process it, because he died very suddenly. He died of cancer. My dad was a tough son of a bitch. He would never go to he was an old mountain boy. Didn't want to go to the doctor, just didn't go. And then by the time that they found the cancer, it was through his liver, it was through everything. And then I'll never forget, the doctor goes, Mr. Cathey, you're the strongest man I've ever met in my life. He goes, your liver looks like Swiss cheese. And my dad goes, well, you can't live without a liver. And the doctor says, no, sir, you can't. So it did turn out to be musical therapy for me. And one of the best songs that came from it, off the Confessions of Man album, I wrote a song called One More Day. And it's basically me talking about how, we never know when they're going to be gone. We just don't know. And if we could just all have just one more day, just one more day. And I have lost count the amount of people that have come up to me and I said, Roy, that song One More Day, it helped me deal with my mother's death, or my father, or my sister, or my best friend died in a car crash. And I play that song on repeat. And for me as an artist, do I wish that I had more zeros in my bank account? Absolutely. You know what I mean? But for me as an artist, to be able to write something and create something that connects with people on that visceral of a level, that makes them heal, that makes them cope and deal with their loss, that makes me a wealthy man. And I'm not an overly religious person, but I believe that what I have done to help other people through their time of pain has hopefully saved me a little seat somewhere. Whatever there is, they're going to go, you know what? You're a pretty good dude. You helped out a lot of people with that song. So, One More Day really did, it was musical therapy dealing with my father. Um, one of the earlier Fifth records, Plead. It was about my first divorce, mother of my kids. I mean, I'm very transparent with some of my lyrics, and it got to be where I was almost too transparent with it. But One More Day is the one that was the way that I was able to deal with my father passing away. So you need to give that one a listen and think about your dad.
One More Day, the ultimate tribute to dad there.
Yes, yes.
Um,
You'll
wow.
feel it too, brother. You go listen to it, and you're gonna feel it. And I really want you to listen to that one and absorb it. So
Dare I even ask, after you saying all those things, if the band's journey mirrored your personal evolution over the years? I mean, you've tapped into some pretty um, raw emotion
hmm
with some of those tunes, etc. Does it spill beyond that?
yes, yes. I mean, sometimes the lyrics are just a little bit too close. There's been times that, yeah, I've played that song and I get choked up on stage because my mind starts thinking. You can create something that brings out so much raw emotion. It's hard to hold that stuff back, even though you're out there performing and you're trying to, put on a show and everything. So, but that's just the way that I am. To me, good music, good rock and roll, good art is going to invoke real emotions. And if it's not bringing out that primal pain, if it doesn't make you smile and think about the good times, if it doesn't make you a little teary eyed thinking about the good memories that you have of people that you lost, you're writing fluff. And I don't want to be known as that guy. I want to be known as the guy that had the great voice but wrote thoughtful, insightful lyrics that made people go, "Wow, that helps me." And that's what any real true artist should want.
Roy, I just realized as you're telling me these things, I haven't even listened to the song like during this time period, right? But just you telling me has pulled me in where I'm going, where am I in this interview? Where am I? Because I'm so drawn in and intrigued by your story about the song, about
hmm
the truth and the realities that you've brought us forward, that I find myself pulled into that. And I imagine that as others are listening and they relate to that, that the
hmm
same thing is going to happen. Um, Switching gears a little bit, because we got really serious there, and there's nothing wrong with that, because I think something good for some other people who are going to listen to it, they're going to benefit from it.
That's
Um,
good.
Talk about a couple of other songs, Blind and Starlight. These land on Apple's Breaking Hard Rock playlists. Um, what is it about these tracks with listeners in 2025 that they make this connection with these songs?
Well, I think that the thing about the fifth and this record in particular is it's real. I mean, it is real rock music. It is the most organic stuff that I've put out. We're a modern rock band, but you can hear elements of the 80s. You can feel that realness that came from that era, but also it has that modern sound to it. I think that Blind kind of caught on because it's very very topical. And the lyrics for that one is what really sells it. It's basically that corporations run our country. It's not we the people. It's we the corporation. And I think that there's a lot of people, politicians in particular, that have learned how to tap into people's uh, darkest side, and it's pulled us apart as a nation. And they know what they're doing. The corporations know what they're doing, and we're left in the real world fighting amongst ourselves whenever we should be fighting against them. And blind just is like we're blind. We're a misled nation, and I think a lot of people kind of pick up on that angst in my vocal delivery and in the lyrics. And Starlight is just a great tune. You know what I mean? It's got that White Snake bluesy kind of vibe. It's got that sway your hips kind of feeling. You know, you just can't help but not kind of, you know, tap your foot and nod your head a little bit because it's got that swagger to it, you know. And these are all, you know, real songs based from real emotions, you know. And Starlight lyrically is basically when a vampire and a werewolf fall in love together, you know. I mean, it's like, and that's what the video is. We did a video for Starlight, and it's, you know, we were able to work with a great director, Jaden Frost, and he just got finished working with one of these haunted trails here in North Carolina, and the set was already there. So we were able to make this incredibly beautiful music video. Um, and part of their shtick is they had this full latex, like $30,000 werewolf costume that we were able to put into the video. And when the director sat down with me, he goes, you know, what are you hearing? What are you seeing? And I'm like, you know, two devils dancing at night by the starlight. And I said, I see a witch voodoo woman and a werewolf. And he goes, got it. And we were able to do it. And I think people are just kind of, they're getting drawn into the lyrics, they're getting drawn into the songs because they kind of go, this sounds familiar, but this is different. You know what I mean? And that's kind of what we really tried to do. We tried to write a modern rock record that had elements of the 80s that made people go, wow, you know, this is good stuff. So
So, Roy, given everything you've told us in terms of the music, the messaging, the journey, the path, the transparency, how you connect with fans through the lyrics and other aspects of your music, do you prefer to play in a larger venue or something smaller and be more personal with fans, even though we're talking rock, hard rock music?
I thrive in front of large audiences. My adrenaline starts pumping and I love the big crowds, but I can still give the same performance in a smaller venue. And one of the sayings that the Fifth has is whether it's 5 or 5,000, we're going to give you the same show. It's the same vibe, it's the same energy. So every instance, whether it be a large venue opening up for a national act with a couple of thousand people there, or whether you're playing your local bar and there's like 150, 200, 300 people, both of them are special to me. And I have the strange ability to be able to use my frontman skills to make that connection with the audience. If it's a huge crowd, I can make that connection with the huge crowd. If it's a small crowd, I can make that connection with them. And that's, you know, that's something that I honed my skills through the years, and also something that I learned from touring with Ronnie James Dio, because Cold Sweat was managed by Wendy Dio, and I got the chance to stand on the side of the stage when we toured with them for 6 months and just drink it in. You know what I mean? And Ronnie had such a aura of power around him. You know, the guy's like 5'3", you know, 5'2". I mean, just, you know, you know, God rest his soul. The guy's voice was bigger than his physical being, but he had this aura around him that just drew people in. And I tried to pick up on that. And another thing I tried to pick up from is Bruce Dickinson of Iron Maiden. You know, you're singing to the people in the back. If you're playing a big place, you're not singing to the people in front. You're pointing out there to the guy that's in the cheap seats. You want him to feel like, I'm singing this to you. This is your song. So between, you know, that kind of stuff, it's kind of made me a better front man, you know. And that's also a thing that the Mouth of the South came from, because I you know, the guys are like, okay, we got a 45-minute set. Add Roy's talking in between the songs, you know what I mean? Because I try and make that connection with the audience, you know. So
I listen, I honestly, I it's one of my favorite things. Like when I go see a show, I want to hear the stories in between. I live for that connection.
Hmm.
And because it does, as a fan listening, you feel a little extra special when you get that little inside story, and then the song means something else to you. The other thing I got to tell you, I'm on a streak when it comes to Ronnie James Dio. Um, I don't know that I have everyone I've interviewed over the last few years, like everybody's had some sort of connection to Ronnie James Dio. Like I'm like I'm missing something here because for all the shows that I've done, I'm like Ronnie was this like amazing person who was everywhere. Cuz
Yes.
and he's tapped into so many and so many people have tapped into Ronnie. Um you know, I already thought Ronnie was great. Now I'm like he was more than great. Um
Ronnie was one of those people that when you met him, he was so warm and engaging and so kind. And I'll never forget because when I first met him, I mean, I already had every one of his cassettes. I went to go see him play a concert in Charlotte. I couldn't believe that I was going to be managed by Wendy Dio. And whenever we played our debut show at the Roxy in Hollywood, all I heard was like, Ronnie's coming tonight. Ronnie's coming tonight. And I'm like, holy shit, Ronnie's coming. And he came to the show, and afterwards he come up into the dressing room, and I will never forget. He comes up to me, he goes, "You got a hell of a voice on you, young man." And I was like, "Pinch me, I could die now." But I had some great one-on-one moments with Ronnie, and one of the best conversations that I ever had with him is he looked me in the eye and he goes, "Roy," he goes, "never forget the fans. Never forget the fans." He's he was adamant about that. He goes, "They're the reason you're where you're at. They're the ones that buy your stuff. They're the ones that we are, you know, they're the people. Never forget the fans." And I've tried to live by that. I've just never, I'm the guy that after the show I'm at the merch booth. I'm the guy that, when we play a festival, Roy will stay 2 days afterwards. If we play on Saturday and the festival lasts through Sunday, you'll see Roy on Sunday walking around, taking pictures, meeting with people. And we did Monsters on the Mountain. Cold Sweat did Monsters on the Mountain about 2 years ago, and we played one night. And the next day, me and my girlfriend were walking around, and I turned the corner, and there was this guy, and he goes, "Roy," he goes, "I knew I'd see you here." He goes, "I knew I'd see you because you're one of us. You're one of the people. You're one of us." And I was like, I just kind of felt Ronnie just kind of, good job, kid. Good job. So, I mean, I'm that guy. I'm not gonna lose sight of this because didn't get super rich, didn't get super famous, missed that little, window of time because of the grunge whole thing and everything. But look, I accomplished everything that I wanted to accomplish when I was a kid. I wanted to be signed to a major label. I wanted to play huge festivals in front of thousands of people. I wanted to fly on planes. I wanted to ride on a tour bus. I wanted to go to different countries. I did all that stuff. I was in magazines. I had a video on MTV. I did all the things that were my dreams. And instead of being the bitter guy that was like, "Oh, I should have been bigger. I could have been rich, blah, blah, blah." I just don't want to live my life that way. I want to look at the glass as half full. I want to be thankful for my opportunities and the blessings that I've had, and I just want to keep putting good out there. I want to keep being positive and keep writing and making music and making art and hopefully touching people. So, not touching people, but you know what
Not touching people. I know what you mean, man. We're touching people, but not really touching people. No, man, listen, that's all noble and awesome. Um, and again, I just go back to transparent. And what else can you give some fans who are listening if it's not transparent? Real quick, just on the idea of accomplishments and things that you've done. Your music has been on shows like Grey's Anatomy and The Voice. Um, w- where do you put that in terms of reaching, different audiences through these platforms? Highs, lows, indifference?
For me, it's a cool little thing to put on your resume. It's a cool little thing for the management to put on your bio sheet and stuff like that. But it's not as cool as that guy that when I turned the corner was like, Roy, you're one of us, man. I knew I'd see you here. That is more of an accomplishment for me,
Yeah.
because whenever you're able to meet people and have them see you play a show, and then they see you a couple of years later when you play a festival again, and I recognize them. That was another thing Ronnie was great about. I'm not as good at it as he is, because he would remember your name. I mean, if I don't know if you've heard these stories or not, but Ronnie would literally meet fans and remember their freaking name. And he would see them like 2 years later or the next tour, and he would talk with them outside by the tour bus and everything. And the fan would come up 2 years later, and he'd be like, "Oh, Guido, great to see you. How's your father doing? He was sick last time that I talked with you. I mean, can you imagine how that impacted people?" And that's the way Ronnie was. So for me to be able to be like, at least recognize these people and be like, dude, what's going on, man? It's good to see you again. They're just like, they can't believe it, because I think a lot of these guys, when they reach superstardom and everything, they're just so inundated with people, all the time, that they just get so blasé about it. But for me, it's still so basic, as far as like I'm reaching people and touching people and trying to make an impact on their lives in some way, and that little bit of human connection goes a long way, and I've really tried to do that, thanks to Mr.
Do,
Ronnie James Dio.
Doing your best, Ronnie. You made me realize I might have to do a Ronnie James Dio show where I'm just gonna go through all the interviews I did and all the people
Mhm.
talking about Ronnie and just put the clips together. Because I,
You
I think I've
should.
got a ton of Ronnie James Dio material. So it's
Yeah.
it's the interview that I can't have that
Mm.
I think I have. You just
Right.
anyways.
Right.
See,
Yeah,
I'm
he was
supposed to pull stuff out of you, Roy, when we're talking, not the other way around. But there you
uh,
go again.
there I go again. I told you, Guido. I told you how I am. We're gonna be free flowing with this thing.
Look, man, I've asked you so much. I don't even know if this is the right thing I should ask you anymore because you've given us a lot of material. Is there anything about the fifth that fans don't know about yet that we should?
I think the fifth has been my musical vehicle for many, many years, and I don't think that a lot of people realize how sincere this has always been from the very beginning. It was something that, I started to cope with moving back to North Carolina after being in Los Angeles and Atlanta, and moving back to North Carolina, losing my father, having, two kids born, becoming a new father. Uh, you know, my life has had so many ups and downs and changes and everything. The fifth has always been a true organic extension of myself. And, for people to be able to go through the musical catalog and see the steady progression of the band, and see the material get stronger and get deeper and get more in tune with real emotion and real feelings for people. I just hope that people take away that, the fifth is a a real thing. You know what I mean? It's not just a bunch of guys that wanted to get together and, chase chicks and drink and party and stuff like that. It was always about the purity of rock and roll, and the purity of how we can take this art form and really make it into something real and special, and not so frivolous. And, I'm not Dream Theater, I'm not Rush. You know what I mean? I still have my share of debauchery laced lyrics. But, if people can take away anything about the fifth, is that it's real deal emotions and real musicianship, and people that care about what we're putting out and what we're giving to the fans.
Now, Roy, as you bring sincerity and meaning to people's lives with your music in the fifth, and as you've talked about the entire show, connecting, um, we're on social media. You have a website, thefifthmusic.com. You also have the Fifth Music on Facebook. Um, where do people best connect with you and the band?
Those platforms are the best. You know, I'm the one that kind of monitors the Fifth's Facebook page. You could also find me on Facebook as well. You know, I'm there. I'm not out there raising as much hell as I used to. You know, my management is like, "Bro, you got to tone it down a little bit. We're trying to promote this record, so can you not be so controversial with some of your posts?" So I'm like, "All right, okay, you know." So I mean, just reach out to us. We're there, and we're very accessible. I'm very accessible. I'm easy to find.
I want to thank you for coming on the show. Everything you talked about, rolling up the sleeves, being transparent, and all of that. Hopefully, you'll come back again, Roy. Any closing remarks as I've kept you way longer than you agreed to be here?
Well, first and foremost, thanks for having me on. You're a super cool dude. But from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank you, and thank other people that do what you do, because you guys are holding the banner. You guys are waving the banner of rock and roll. You're holding it up high. You're exposing people to music that normally they would not know anything about. You know what I mean? And you guys, the guys that are on the front line, keeping the genre alive. So, I want to thank you, Guido, for what you do. I would love to be on the show again. If you want to do a wrestling show, you and me, I think that we would have a blast talking about that. But yeah, man, you got your boy Roy. Anytime you need me, I'm here for you, buddy.
Thank you. You're so, so kind. There you have it, folks. The Fifth, a band that proves rock isn't just alive, it's haunting, it's relentless, and it's got a heart that won't quit. From the soulful ache of Haunted Heart to the anthem like punch of Blind and Starlight, all the way back to the grit and fire of Shake Little Sister, the Fifth has carved out a sound that's equal parts powerful and personal. If you're just discovering them now, welcome to the family, because once you've been pulled into their world, you'll find there's no turning back. Big thanks to Roy Cathey for joining us tonight. Remember, whether you're feeling we are one or chasing the echo of coming to get you, the Fifth is here to remind us all rock lives on. I'll have Roy's and the Fifth socials in the show notes. You'll hear their new music on thepathradio.com. Thank you so much, Roy. Best wishes to you and the band, and I am
Thank
looking
you,
forward to
sir.
having you back again.
Absolutely, Guido. You have a great night, my friend.